Hi, Misha here, and during our recent range trip, this is one, honestly, we just wanted to bring out because we haven't had it in a while. This is the Daniel Defense MK18 pistol. And this is a semi-automatic version of the military's MK18 Mod.1. And while we were at it, I thought it'd be fun to talk about how it compares with this gun here, a gun that we have looked at back in the late spring, the Midwest Industries GAU5A pistol, a pistol version of the Air Force's new GAU-5A ASDW, Air Crew Self-Defense Weapon. And in that video of ours and other people's, it's been asked, why did they not just go with a MK18 or something similar? Why go to the system here? Well, we'll talk about that. And to really give good context, we'll talk about the evolution, service, and really purpose of each of these, because they are actually different, even though they are based on the AR-15 carbine. But first, let's run a few rounds through the Daniel Defense, and then we'll come back here. MK18. Jay with the MK18. Any thoughts?
It feels really, even with the light on it and stuff, in the quad rail, it feels very handy. I love Daniel Defense's armor. I love their furniture. Armor works too, I guess. The really grippy, rubberized feel, texture is really nice. But this gun, frankly, this is the smoothest AR pistol that I've ever shot. It's just, there's something about it that feels really solid, but also really handy at the same time. So I really like this pistol.
But the fact that it has a plastic dust cover breaks it for you, right?
Oh yeah, no, the whole gun is just throwing it in.
Yeah, just like the HK MR556A1.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Always fun, and it's never been sensitive to ammo types, brass or steel. And this is a newer production variant where they've changed up the gas port a bit. Originally they opened it up for the commercial guns, and then they shrunk it back down some. But it runs very well. So what about the Midwest here? We did run a number of rounds through it back in April and May. So let's revisit some of those clips, just to give some kind of context and comparison.
ASDW. ASDW. And what ammo was that?
This is Wolf Colt.
And the ASDW continues to run well for us today. Yeah, it's a good solid AR-15. So these are quite similar, and even priced pretty similar. Both are chambered for 5.56 NATO. Both have a adjustable SB tactical arm brace. Both have a standard A3 upper. Pretty standard. Lower. Both come with ambidextrous safeties. Both have forward assist, brass deflector, ejection port. Although, as I jokingly pointed out, the Daniel Defense does have a polymer one. Whatever that's worth to you. So the differences really have to do with the barrels. The Mark 18 has a 10.3-inch barrel with low profile gas block, carbine length gas system, and Daniel Defense RIS 2 rail system for free floating the barrel. And the Daniel Defense has their own flash hider that's quick detach compatible for a sound suppressor. This does not come with sights. I have just a set of, I think, SIG sights that I put on here, along with just a generic primary arms, red dot sight. Nothing special there. As for the Midwest, we have a slightly longer barrel at 12.5 inches with a standard A2 flash hider. This has a Midwest 10.5-inch M-Lock compatible handguard with low profile gas block again, and this does come with sights. It comes with M-Bus Pro Magpul metal flip-up sights, and in service would not typically have an optic. And of course it has some interesting features like a QD barrel and folding grip, whereas the Mark 18 would not. The Mark 18 started off with the Navy, then would soon spread to the Marines and the Coast Guard, and is even used by the Army. Whereas the ASDW, to be fair, a much newer design, but to this point, is just used by the Air Force. Not even the National Guard gets them yet, so as usual, the Air Force is doing their own thing. And this situation dates all the way back to really the Vietnam War. So, how did the Mark 18 come to be? What is it designed to do? Where does it excel? And why do they need to develop this instead of just going with something like this? Let's break it down a little bit. Essentially, the Mark 18 is a cut down one of these. An M4. Okay, maybe not quite that simple, but really close. And that's really where it began. As you know, the M4 was adopted in 1994, and today is the standard issue throughout pretty much the entire military. Even the Marines gave up their beloved M16 rifles. The M4 originally, though, in the 1990s especially, had 3-round burst instead of full auto fire. This wasn't always what Special Forces, SOCOM, Special Operations Command, needed. So even before the M4 was official, the idea dated back to 1989, and specifications were laid out in 1993 for the SOP mod program. special forces, special operations, peculiar modification. And this was basically to be an issue kit to allow them to configure, convert, and customize an AR-15, M16, M4, what have you, for special missions needs. It included all kinds of things, lights, lasers, all kinds of new tech. And in part of that SOP mod kit originally was the CQBR, Close Quarters Battle Receiver. And this was to be a compact upper that could be dropped on to any lower to make it into a subcompact carbine, essentially returning to something like the XM177 of Vietnam. Well, eventually the CQBR was dropped from SOP mod, but it was picked up by the Navy and given to NSW Crane. And they really had something going by 1999, and the first early examples were available by 2000. These were CQBRs as they were just upper receivers, and they would take an M4 upper, a Colt 14.5 inch government profile upper, and they would cut the barrel back to 10.5 inches and enlarge the gas port. Early on, that's about all they did. They still used a standard weight buffer, and the bolt was not really modified a whole lot. Heck, even the earliest sights were cut down A2. But soon, LMT would get involved and start supplying parts, including factory-built 10.5 inch barrels, as well as LMT rear sights. And it would go from there. Now, these were just uppers. Now, Colt heard about this and offered to make factory 10.5 uppers. But around this time, the military would change the spec to 10.3. They went ahead and shaved off about a 1/4 inch. They could still use the Knight's Armament sound suppressor that the CQBR was meant for. But, yeah. And early on, such uppers would either have a standard handguard or a Knight's Armament quad rail like this with Knight's Armament grip. And they would develop this butt stock, the SOP mod stock. Originally, they were manufactured in-house by Crane. Soon, production was transferred to LMT, who ironed out some bugs. They would also, with some, start changing more than just the barrel. They would start modifying the bolt for improved reliability and begin using heavier buffers. So Colt would start supplying complete 10.3 inch uppers. Next, Crane would start assembling complete guns, and this is when the MK18 Mod.1 name comes in. And they would begin by using lowers that were left over from old M16A1s in Navy stockpiles. They would take the fixed stock off, they'd put on an adjustable, either a 6-position or a 4-position extension, and they could have a wide range of stocks from the standard M4, even older CAR-15s, or the SOP mod stock. And since these were A1s, they had safe, semi-full auto lowers. And they would start using the H buffer more and more for standard ammo like M193 and M1855, and using H2s later on for heavy rounds or special purpose rounds. They were still doing the Knight's Armament quad rail, yada yada. And this was in conjunction with what we know as the Block 1 program for the M4, M4A1, which had evolved into the Block 1 phase and then the Block 2. And so the MK18 would kind of keep pace. Originally, Crane was building these pretty much custom, so they were only available in small numbers. But as Colt started supplying uppers and then later complete guns with the 10.3 upper, marked M4 or M4A1 lower, more and more would be available by 2006. This meant more units could carry the Mark 18. A year earlier, a new company came onto the scene, Daniel Defense, with its RIS 1 free-floated quad-rail system. And this gained a lot of attention. Later on, it would be updated to the RIS 2, like you see here, and integrated into the Mark 18, along with the Mark 12 low-profile gas block, thus becoming the Mark 18 Mod 1. So the difference between Mod 0 and Mod 1 is the Handguard. A Mod 0 would have a Knights style like this with fixed front sight, and a Mod 1 would have this style with the low profile. Both would still have the government profile barrel at 10.3 inches, 1 and 7 twist, chrome lined, the usual. And by this point, the bolt was getting modified. A rubber O-ring was added to the extractor, along with a new spring to improve reliability. And as far as what these were issued with, there was never an official standard, so all kinds of sights and whatnot could be found with any of the Mark 18s. And a lot more were customized in the field by soldiers. Originally used by special forces in the Navy like the SEALs, later they would be used by boarding parties or boat defense teams, explosive disposal teams, and so on. Next, the Marine Corps would begin issuing these to certain specialist units, as would some in the Coast Guard. It was reliable, compact, handy, and pretty lightweight. Even the Army would start ordering the Mark 18 for SOCOM units. They would end up being used in small numbers by the Rangers, Green Berets, Delta, airborne units, so on and so forth. So as the 21st century rolled on, they went from being custom-built guns to mass-produced guns, and the prime contractor for the handguards went from being Knights to Daniel Defense here. And while some early barrels were made by LMT, the majority have been made by Colt. And they're still very much in service today. To date, about 11,000 have been built and issued. And it's a pretty popular gun and one of the best short-barreled ARs. Ironically, the 10-inch was the first compact carbine Colt tried way back in the 1960s. So this was used as very much an offensive weapon in areas where something very compact was needed. Again, on board ships, in urban environments, or sometimes by paratrooper type units. And it really was just a M4A1 shortened down a bit, about 4 inches shorter overall. The thing is just a hair under 30 inches with the stock extended, and just under 27 inches with it fully collapsed. So, with that, what about the ASDW? This GAU5A is based on this older gun, or rather, This is my interpretation of it. The Air Force was the first branch to adopt the M16 and were early users of the carbines as well. In 1966, they purchased a number of 10-inch Colt guns without forward assist, designating them as GAU-5A. And then later they would purchase some 11.5-inch guns, designating them as GAU-5A/A. And these would have the 1 in 12 twist weight for the older guns. The other bullets, the 55 grain. Well, in the 80s, once the 62 grain and the 1 in 7 twist came in, they rebuilt a lot of their older carbines with the newer 1 in 7 twist barrels. Some would get pencil barrels, others would get the more M4 style barrel. And that's where the GAU-5P came into service, and it was basically a mutt of whatever parts they had. Of course, the Air Force would later buy M4s too. And this is my Troy that I put a Colt barrel in, like I said, to kind of make a GAU-5P clone. So, fast forwarding. Around 2016, after the Air Force had been fighting in modern theaters, and after certain events, especially with Russian downed pilots, they decided that, an M9 pistol is just not enough defense for a downed aircrewman. They decided they needed something with better range, more firepower, more staying power. They originally did try just taking M4 carbines and cutting the barrel down right in front of the gas block, sight block, to 8 inches. No flash hider, so they were very loud, very recoily, very flashy, and to work properly with basically no dwell, they had to really open up the gas port, meaning recoil could be pretty stout. This was an interim solution. It wasn't really workable. The thing is, the Air Force needed something that could fit in their ACES survival kit, which was in the ejection seats of most of their jets. And that had a hard limit. It had dimensions of 16 inches by 14 inches by 3.5 inches. So, in 2018, they announced this gun. And it has started to go into use into aircraft in 2019, around April, and has spread throughout the Air Force since. What they have done, they've taken older GAU-5Ps as well as M4s and totally rebuilt them. They have a safe single or semi 3-round burst lower, standard pick rail upper. They have a Cry Havoc QD barrel system, a 10.5-inch Midwest M-Lock compatible handguard, standard A2 bird cage, a 12.5-inch barrel manufactured by BCM, 1 in 7 twist. They have mag pull metal flip sights as standard. They have this Fab Defense folding grip. Of course, normally they would have a standard collapsing stock, although they would remove the sling swivel to make it less thick. And this was to be the aircrew self-defense weapon. It was to be in the ejection seat, and the idea, the specs were to have a range of about 200 yards, and to be able to provide enough firepower for a crewman to defend himself for 3 to 4 hours until help could arrive. To that end, in the kit, they were packed with 4 30-round mags with 120 rounds of ammunition. Also in the kit were other things like a flashlight, a flare gun, medical supplies, even a raft. So they had to get a lot into a little kit. He ended up weighing about 40 pounds, and this was only about 6.5 pounds of it. So this is not a frontline combat gun. This is a survival rifle. And it's the first survival rifle with a centerfire the Air Force has really had. And a pilot will still have his M9, but this gives him something extra to work with. And so, yeah, these started to be fielded last year. The conversions are being done in Texas at the Air Force's gunsmithing center. And their goal is to do about 100 of these a week. And the initial order was for just over 2,100, but chances are more will be ordered. It's worth saying that they didn't have to go through a giant trials process. They could just kind of go with the COTS, off-the-shelf products, because of what this is and how it was procured. And today, these can be found in the seats of most active jets, A-10s, F-15s, F-16s, even bombers like the B-1B and the B-2, and of course, in the F-22 Raptor. But these are only being issued for active Air Force units. The Air National Guard is still out of luck because there's not enough for them. So what the Air National Guard is making do with are 10.5-inch barrel carbines ordered from Fabrique Nationale USA, FN USA. So like I said, we have fired both. This is very close to the military gun, with just a few differences. Well, let's show a few more shots at the range, and then we'll discuss why the Mark 18 would not have fulfilled the role that the ASDW does. Mark 18. Held open, even with Wolf. ASDW, the format. So here they are both with their arm braces fully collapsed. Stocks would be the same. And the ASDW is actually a little bit longer, which you'd expect. So it really comes down to fitting in that ACES 2 survival kit. If this were to fit, it would have to have a barrel 8 inches. And many have said, well, why not just pop the pins and have the upper separated from the lower? Okay, so let's do that for the Mark 18. And at the same time, let's collapse the ASDW, the GAU5A, to its smallest package. By the way, yeah, using the GAU5A name again, they fully acknowledge they used it a long time ago. But they say, well, it was a long time ago, so we're going to use it again. I guess they like it. It's very easy to pop the pins on most AR-15 lowers to separate them. So that's not really a big deal. Having the folding pistol grip is nice. It really does save quite a bit of length. But of course you can install that on any of them. So looking at the Air Force rear section, everything is self-contained here. We do have this extension on the barrel. Put the bolt safely inside there. When you look at the Mark 18, if you think about it, when it's apart, this is all exposed. Now if it's in a kit, that's one thing, but you know, the trigger could get pulled, the hammer could come up. You have your components unprotected. Whereas in this system, the only thing unprotected is the very far end, the bolt face. Your hammer and all that is safely sealed away as normal. And for the purposes of a kit, having this step down here and having this here, this is a more efficient use of space. It's a square shape, whereas this is not. But of course, lengthwise, they're the same, with the Air Force being just a smidge longer because of this QD collar. So the real difference has to do with the uppers. Look at this. The Air Force, well, not upper, I guess, barrel assembly is 15 inches. The Mark 18 with the 10.3 inch barrel is 19 inches. Never mind that the maximum length for the kit is 16, so this is way too long. This has a barrel that's about 2¼ inches longer. So you get a longer barrel in a shorter package here. It also gives you more dwell time between the gas block and the muzzle, meaning you don't have to modify the bolt in the Air Force gun like you do the Mark 18. You can pretty much get away with using a standard full auto bolt carrier. Here, of course, the receiver extension sticks out. That's about it. Here we have the bottom of the bolt exposed, so potentially in storage debris could get in there. It's relatively well sealed up, but it still does expose some operating components, including the rear here, whereas this system really doesn't. Also, this QD system is very simple and intuitive to use. Other things like the slim handguards, slim sights are the same like with the pistol grip. Yeah, you could put those on a Mark 18, so that's not a big deal. The main thing is simply size. The ASDW gives you a longer barrel, therefore more effective range, a longer sighting radius, which the Air Force really wanted. The further they can engage targets by the aircrew, the higher their chances of surviving and keeping the enemies at bay. On the other hand, a Mark 18 is designed for close-in fighting, not for engaging targets at distance. The Air Force gun is a self-defense gun. The Mark 18 is primarily an offensive gun. And again, just the way they would be stored, the gun is better sealed up for the Air Force. If you try to do the Mark 18 in pieces, your chances of getting it fouled up or whatnot are much higher. Plus, yeah, pins, while they're easy enough to pop, are a little smaller, more fidgety. And the idea with the ASDW is to make it as simple as possible. We have very big latches. Because, I mean, if you just get ejected from an airplane going hundreds of miles per hour and then fell through the sky and then hit the ground at pretty good speed, you might just be a little disoriented. So you probably want something that's as foolproof as possible. And I would say this system is more than trying to assemble an upper and a lower. So long story short, the Mark 18 is excellent for its intended role, and the ASDW is very well thought out for its intended role. Well, surely appreciate you joining us here. Got these back together. Really, like I said, just wanted to take the good old Daniel Defense back out because it is a pleasure. It's a very well done gun and very reliable. In terms of durability, no doubt this, or at least a military Mark 18, would hold up more than a military ASDW. But this gun is meant to be used over and over in combat. This gun is meant to be used maybe just one time to keep an air crewman alive on the ground. So if it does that, it's done its job very well. Also keep in mind the way the Air Force went about designing this and doing this was actually very cost effective. They're building these on existing guns, they're doing the work in-house, and they didn't have this long drawn-out trials process. And if it saves lives, I'm in favor of it. This was designed to be as compact and lightweight as possible. And since they only have 120 rounds, it has 3-round burst. It makes perfect sense. Conversely, it also has a longer barrel. Whereas the Mark 18 has full auto. It's heavier, sturdier, to really take some abuse. And it is shorter. But it's not as compact and can't be stored in such a small area. Plus, sometimes the Air Force really does just like to do their own thing. Hey, maybe the Army will end up adopting a version of the ASDW and to put on board things like their AH-64 Apaches. That would be interesting. But yeah, this is new in service, so we don't really know a lot. Like I said, the initial order will be about 2,100. With these, we're up to about 11,000 in the world, but they've been around 20 years, so, and gone through several iterations. With that, folks, we'll let you go. If you have any questions or comments, if you own either of these, we'd love to hear your experiences. As always, if you could, like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link to our Patreon page. This is Misha, and Jay and I both will catch you very soon next time.